In part 1 of this story, we witnessed an impossible achievement, a revolution in human consciousness. We saw how the black-headed people of Sumer, faced with a harsh and unforgiving landscape, tamed the wild rivers, invented the city, and captured thought itself in the intricate web of cuneiform. They built a world of monumental temples, bustling trade, and a complex social order, a world governed by the new and powerful idea of the king. But this new world, with its great surplus of wealth and its dense population, created an equally new and terrifying problem. For the first time in history, humanity had organized itself into massive, powerful, and competing political units, the city-states. And with dozens of proud kings ruling over dozens of walled cities, all drawing water from the same 2 rivers, and all competing for the same limited resources, large-scale, organized conflict became a mathematical certainty. This is the story of what happened next. The story of history's first arms race, its first treaties, and its first recorded war. Our guide to this new age of conflict is this stone monument, the Stele of the Vultures, a memorial that tells 2 stories. One, of a brutal war between men for land and water, and another, of a battle between the gods themselves for honor and supremacy. For the Sumerians, these 2 stories were one and the same. To wage war, a king required a divine mandate alongside his soldiers and spears. To understand why these first wars were fought with such brutal, pious conviction, we must first meet the cosmic antagonists who gave the commands, and understand the terrifying worldview that compelled the kings of Sumer to obey. The divine order of Sumer was a celestial bureaucracy, and at its head sat a fearsome executive, Enlil. He was the god of the storm, and more importantly, the god of the absolute, unchallengeable decree. His personality was that of a stern patriarch, a cosmic emperor whose authority was final. His moods dictated the fate of nations, and his commands were the very foundation of order in the universe. This divine authority had profound and immediate earthly consequences. As we saw in part 1, the Sumerians believed that legitimate kingship was a gift, lowered from heaven, and it was Enlil, from his sacred temple at Nippur, who did the lowering. He was the divine kingmaker. A ruler could conquer a city, but his rule was considered a mere act of banditry until he was recognized by Enlil. This made the god of the storm the ultimate arbiter of political power. This role also made him the ultimate arbiter of war. For a king to launch a major military campaign, he needed to be able to claim it was the will of Enlil. An attack on a rival was framed as the king acting as Enlil's champion, punishing a sinner who had violated the divine order. Enlil's name was the ultimate justification, the divine permission slip for organized violence. Where unyielding authority exists, a countercurrent of ingenuity always flows. This was the domain of Enki, the god of wisdom, magic, and the life-giving sweet waters. While Enlil's temple was on the stormy plains, Enki's home was the Apsu, the mysterious freshwater abyss beneath the earth, a place of secrets, creation, and profound knowledge. If Enlil was the god of the rigid decree, Enki was the god of the clever workaround. His personality was a stark contrast to his brothers. Where Enlil was stern and authoritarian, Enki was often portrayed as avuncular, curious, and deeply fond of humanity, the very beings he had helped design. He was the divine artisan, the keeper of the sacred Mies, that contained the blueprints for civilization, and he often acted as humanity's secret advocate in the divine court. This created the central, driving tension of the Sumerian cosmos. Enlil demanded absolute, unquestioning obedience to maintain the rigid structure of the universe. Enki, the master of invention, constantly sought to bend those rules, to find loopholes, to create new solutions that his brother had not foreseen. He was a force of benevolent chaos in Enlil's ordered world. This eternal struggle between the Lord of the Storm and the Lord of Wisdom profoundly reflected the Sumerian experience, a life caught between absolute, terrifying authority and the desperate, clever struggle to survive. This same conflict between the gods would, time and again, place humanity in mortal danger. The divine drama involved more than a simple pair of rivals. Into the rigid conflict between order and wisdom stepped a third, chaotic and utterly electrifying force, Inanna. She was the goddess of the morning and evening star, her nature a universe of contradictions. She was the goddess of passionate love and sensual desire, and simultaneously the goddess of brutal, merciless warfare. Her defining characteristic was a boundless, restless ambition. She was the divine embodiment of transgression, of wanting more than your allotted share. While Enlil and Enki had their established domains, Inanna's myths consistently show her striving to conquer new ones. She was the divine patron of cities that were expansionist, of kings who were bold, and of wars that were waged for glory and prestige. Her home city of Uruk, the great metropolis, was a perfect reflection of her ambitious character. No story better captures her methods than her theft of the sacred Mies from Enki. These divine blueprints for civilization were his property, but Inanna believed they belonged in her city. Through a contest of drinking and flattery, she tricked the Lord of Wisdom into gifting them all to her. The story is a masterful allegory for intercity rivalry, a tale of one city-state gaining a technological and cultural advantage over another through cunning and audacity. When Enki sobered up and sent his demonic servants to reclaim his property, Inanna fought them off. Her victory was twofold. She first tricked him, and then she defeated him. This reveals the core of her character. She was a goddess of action, who believed power was a thing to be taken, and, once taken, to be defended with force. The hymns describe her taking pleasure in the pounding of battle. She is a goddess who walks on the heads of her enemies. This violent, martial imagery made her the perfect patron for a new kind of leader emerging in Sumer, the Lugal, the great man, the warlord. While a pious king might pray to Enlil for legitimacy, a king with dreams of conquest would pray to Inanna for the audacity to win. She was a necessary, dangerous, and destabilizing force in the cosmos, constantly challenging the established order. She represented the idea that power could be seized, challenging the established order of inheritance and divine decree. In the increasingly violent world of the Sumerian city-states, this was an idea whose time had come. To understand why a Sumerian king would march his people into a bloody war at a god's command, we must first understand the Sumerian story of their own creation. The Sumerian story of their own creation is one of labor. In the beginning, before humankind, the universe was a great cosmic estate, and the grueling work of maintaining it, digging the canals, tilling the soil, fell to the younger generation of gods, the Agigi. For centuries they toiled, their resentment festering until it finally exploded into a full-blown crisis. They burned their tools and marched on the temple of Enlil, surrounding his sanctuary in an act of defiant rebellion. The work was too hard, they declared. They would do it no longer. This divine labor strike threw the cosmos into chaos. A furious Enlil demanded the execution of the rebels, but the other gods, sympathizing with the strikers, refused. It was the ever-practical Enki who devised the solution. A new worker was needed, a substitute to bear the yoke of the gods. He proposed the creation of a new, lesser being. To give this creature purpose and intelligence, a god would have to be sacrificed. A volunteer was chosen, a god named Geshtu-Ea, the one who had intelligence, and he was slain. His divine blood was then mixed with clay from the earth. The mother goddess, Nintu, took this sacred mixture and, in a great act of creation, fashioned the first human beings. Their purpose was explicitly stated from the very beginning. Let the creature be man, the gods declared. Let him be charged with the service of the gods, that they might have their rest. This was the foundational truth of the Sumerian worldview. Humanity was created for a single reason: to be the workforce of the gods. Their role was that of slaves, designed to perform the endless labor of existence so the gods could live in leisure. This belief shaped every aspect of their society. The temples served as the headquarters of the divine masters. The priests were the overseers, and the king was the foreman, responsible for ensuring the workforce was productive. This grim theology had a profound implication for war. If a city's patron god commanded his king to attack a rival, it was a work order beyond debate. Just as a Sumerian was expected to dig a canal or harvest barley at his god's command, he was expected to fight and die. To refuse was to violate the very purpose of your existence, a sin that could bring divine wrath down upon your entire community. The gods' plan worked too well. Humanity multiplied. 1,200 years passed, and the land grew crowded. 600 more years passed, and the population exploded. The world became a cacophony. The Sumerian texts say the land was bellowing like a bull. The pleasing hum of diligent workers had become the deafening, chaotic roar of an out-of-control population, and it robbed the king of the gods, the great Enlil, of his sleep. His patience, never abundant, was at an end. He convened the divine assembly and declared his frustration. "The noise of mankind has become too much for me," he raged. "I am losing sleep." His first solution was to unleash a plague of pestilence. He unleashed the plague upon the mortals, but the ever-wise Enki advised the human hero, Atrahasis, to have the people cease worship to all gods, except Namtar, the demon of pestilence. Bribed with exclusive worship, Namtar stayed his hand, and the plague receded. Enlil was furious at being thwarted. He tried again. This time, he decreed a great famine, commanding the sky god Adad to withhold the rains. The fields turned to dust. The black-headed people began to starve. For 6 long years, the famine wore on, a horrifying scene of social collapse. Again, Enki intervened, helping humanity find ways to survive by harvesting the sea, a domain Enlil did not directly control. This final circumvention broke Enlil's resolve. He had tried plague, he had tried starvation, and still, humanity clung to life, aided by his clever brother. He resolved to end the matter permanently. In the great assembly of the gods, he decreed a final, inescapable solution: a great deluge, a flood that would scour the earth clean and wipe out humanity entirely. And this time, he bound every single god, including Enki, by a terrible, unbreakable oath to remain silent. Enki was caught in a cosmic trap. His oath forbade him from warning any mortal, yet his conscience forbade him from allowing his creation to be annihilated. So he devised a brilliant loophole. He flew to the hut of his favored human, the pious king Atrahasis, and began speaking, not to the man, but to the wall of his house. "Reed hut, reed hut, wall, wall," he whispered urgently. "Dismantle your house and build a boat. Spurn property and save life." Atrahasis understood the desperate message. Enki gave him the precise dimensions for the vessel, a colossal circular coracle, reinforced with bitumen and pitch. Atrahasis gathered his family, the master craftsmen of his city, and a collection of all living animals. He told the elders of his city a lie concocted by Enki, that he had to flee the land because the god Enlil was angry with him, and that he was sailing to the domain of Enki to live. The moment the boat was sealed, the weather turned. For 7 days and 7 nights, the deluge raged. The texts describe a cataclysm so absolute, so terrifying, that it horrified even the gods who had decreed it. The mother goddess Nintu wept for her children, and the other great gods, the Anunnaki, cowered like dogs, crouching against the outer wall of heaven. They wept, their lips burning with thirst, starved of the smoke from the mortals' sacrificial altars which had been their nourishment. In their arrogance, they had forgotten one crucial detail. The servants they were destroying were also the servants who fed them. When the 7th day arrived, the storm subsided. Atrahasis looked out upon a silent, drowned world where all of humanity had returned to clay. He wept. When the waters receded, he emerged from the boat and immediately prepared a sacrifice. The gods, starved and desperate, smelled the sweet savor of the roasting meat and gathered like flies over the offering. Enlil, seeing the boat, was incandescent with rage, but Enki confessed his trickery and, after a great confrontation, convinced Enlil to relent. The world, however, was forever changed. The gods introduced new fates to keep the human population in check. Humanity was allowed to survive, but the lesson was seared into their consciousness. The gods could and would destroy them if they became displeasing. This was the ultimate cautionary tale, a story that would echo in the mind of every king who received a divine command.
And so, humanity was allowed to continue its service, but the relationship was forever altered. The mortals now understood their utter dependence on the gods, and the gods understood their own surprising dependence on the mortals who fed them. This created a new, intense, and deeply codependent bond between a city and its patron deity. The people would serve their god with a new and desperate piety, and the god, in turn, was expected to protect and champion their city against all others. It was in this new world, born from the waters of the Great Flood, that the very idea of the city as a divine estate, a holy property worth fighting and dying for, was truly forged. A concept that would turn the plains of Mesopotamia into a battlefield. In part 1, we've seen how each Sumerian city saw itself as the chosen domain of a god. Now we must examine what that belief meant in practice, how it transformed land, law, and war. The Sumerian worldview was fundamentally different from our own. The city of Lagash belonged to the god Ningirsu, The great metropolis of was the personal property of the moon god, Nanna. Uruk was the estate of Inanna, and Eridu belonged to Enki. Each city was a god's household, a divine estate on earth. The fields that surrounded it were the god's personal gardens. The herds of cattle and sheep were the god's private wealth. And the people who lived within its walls were, ultimately, the god's servants. This ideology transformed the very landscape into a divine chessboard, where each city-state was a player piece belonging to an unseen, powerful master. This meant a border dispute was never a simple political disagreement. An argument over a stretch of fertile land or access to an irrigation canal was a direct insult to the honor of the city's divine master. If the neighboring city of Umma encroached on the fields of Lagash, the god of Umma was seen as defying the great Ningirsu himself. War, therefore, became a sacred duty, the necessary response to a theological crime. This belief system fostered a powerful form of civic pride that was inseparable from religious devotion. A citizen of was a servant of Nanna, and they believed their god was greater than the patron god of a rival city. This divine competition drove cities to build ever larger ziggurats and more magnificent temples, all to increase the power and prestige, the radiant melam, of their patron deity. A strong city meant a strong god, and a strong god meant a strong city, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of competitive ambition. This religious competition shaped more than temples and wars. It structured how the economy itself was organized. To truly understand how cities fueled their divine ambitions, we must look at the economic machinery beneath the theology. The Sumerian economy was a sophisticated, mixed economy, with a significant private sector operating alongside the great temple and palace institutions. While the temple owned vast tracts of inalienable land, cuneiform records reveal that other land could be, and was, privately owned, bought, and sold. These documents record the sales of land, gardens, and houses among private citizens. They even show the king purchasing land from a subject, implying he was bound by a rule of law and could not simply confiscate property at will. This economic reality has a direct impact on the story of Urukagina. His famous reforms were a royal intervention into a complex society to protect the rights of private individuals, the orphan and the widow, from predation by the powerful man. These powerful men were a corrupt elite, likely composed of officials, priests, and wealthy nobles, who used both their state authority and their private wealth to exploit the populace through forced sales, exorbitant fees, and usurious loans. This refinement transforms Urukagina into a more recognizable and compelling figure. He becomes a champion of social justice, fighting systemic corruption within a stratified, mixed economy, a story with timeless resonance. Nowhere were these principles of divine rivalry more brutally demonstrated than in the seemingly endless conflict between the neighboring city-states of Lagash and Umma. Between them lay a strip of fertile territory known as the Guadana, the edge of the plain. It was a vital agricultural zone, and for centuries it was the subject of a bitter and bloody feud. Both cities claimed it as the rightful property of their patron god. For Lagash, it belonged to Ningirsu. For Umma, it belonged to the god Shara. This conflict raged for so long that eventually the other cities of Sumer grew tired of the constant instability. They called upon a powerful, neutral king from the northern city of Kish, a man named Mesilim, to arbitrate the dispute. Around 2600 BCE, Mesilim traveled south surveyed the land, and rendered his judgment. He drew a new boundary line between the two cities and, to commemorate his decision, he erected a stone monument, a stele, marking the official border. This was a landmark moment in human history, the world's first recorded political treaty, an attempt to resolve a conflict through diplomacy and third-party arbitration. The text was inscribed on the stele for all to see. The new border was consecrated by the word of the powerful god Enlil, making it a sacred and supposedly inviolable boundary. Both the ruler of Lagash and the ruler of Umma swore a great oath to respect this new border, calling upon the gods to witness their promise. For a brief time, it seemed that reason had prevailed. The fields of the Gedena were quiet, tended by the farmers of Lagash, to whom Mesalim had awarded the land. Peace had, at last, come to the bitter plain. But in Sumer, peace was often just a pause between wars. The peace did not last. Decades later, a new aggressive ruler of Umma named Ush decided to act. He saw the Gedena as land stolen from his city's god, Shara, and he would not abide by the treaty. In a stunning act of defiance, he ordered his soldiers to march to the border, where they smashed Mesalim's sacred stele to pieces. This act of vandalism constituted a profound sin. The stele was a sacred object consecrated in Enlil's name. By destroying it, the king of Umma was publicly declaring his contempt for the king of the gods himself. It was a statement of rebellion against the entire cosmic order, a signal that Umma would follow its own ambitions, regardless of the divine consequences. He then led his army across the now unmarked border and seized the Gedena for himself. This invasion was a direct attack on the property of the god Ningirsu, and it occurred during the reign of Eannatum's father, Akurgal. The honor of Lagash and its ruling dynasty was now deeply wounded. They had lost their sacred land, and they lacked the power to immediately reclaim it. This act of aggression triggered a devastating cycle of violence. It set a precedent for generations of conflict, establishing a deep-seated grudge that would fester for nearly a century. The seeds of a great war had been sown in the soil of the Gedena. The man who would answer Umma's crime was Akurgal's son, Eannatum, one of the most formidable rulers of the early dynastic period. He inherited a city whose sacred lands had been seized and whose dynastic honor had been stained. This was the context for his reign. He inherited the role of king and embraced the mantle of an avenger. From his inscriptions, Eannatum emerges as a figure of immense ambition and martial prowess. He describes himself as a beloved son of the gods, nourished by the milk of the mother goddess Ninhursag, and given strength and wisdom by the great gods Enlil and Enki. He was, in his own telling, a man born for greatness, destined from birth to restore and expand the power of Lagash. This sense of destiny was crystallized in a powerful dream. Eannatum claims that his patron god, Ningirsu, appeared to him as he slept. The god spoke to him, recounting the long history of Umma's transgressions and promising Eannatum a glorious victory. Ningirsu promised to march at his side, to cast his great battle net over the enemy. The dream functioned as a divine command. Eannatum awoke with a sacred purpose. His purpose was to act as the champion of his god and the enforcer of the divine will. He saw himself as the hand of cosmic justice, sent to restore his father's honor and reclaim the holy land of his city. He immediately began to gather his army, preparing for a final, decisive confrontation that would settle the fate of the Guedina once and for all. His inscriptions radiate a cold, hard certainty. He intended to make a brutal example of Umma, a message to all the cities of Sumer about the price of defying the great god of Lagash. The army Eannatum gathered was the product of centuries of military innovation. Sumerian warfare had evolved from disorganized brawls between militias into a deadly science. The core of the army was its heavy infantry, organized into a dense formation that historians call the Sumerian phalanx. These were professional or semi-professional soldiers whose lives were dedicated to the art of war. Their primary protection was a conical bronze helmet, often with integrated cheek and neck guards, capable of deflecting blows from a mace or axe. Their bodies were covered by heavy cloaks or kilts, stiffened with leather or small bronze discs, providing a rudimentary form of armor. Their greatest defense was the shield wall. Each soldier carried a massive, rectangular wooden shield, which, when interlocked with their neighbors, formed an almost impenetrable barrier against the enemy's attacks. This interlocked shield, held on the left arm, protected the soldier's own left side and the right side of the man next to him. This technique created immense cohesion, but it also created a key weakness. The man on the far right of the entire line was only half protected. This led to a tactical reality where opposing armies would always try to overlap the enemy's right flank. It also created an unconscious tendency for the whole formation to drift to the right, as each man sought the protection of his neighbor's shield. From behind this wall of shields, the soldiers could strike with their primary weapon, the long spear. Held in an underhand or overhand grip, these spears created a deadly forest of bronze points, keeping the enemy at a distance and allowing the Sumerian troops to inflict casualties with relative impunity. This combination of heavy protection, long reach, and disciplined formation made the Sumerian phalanx a terrifying force on the battlefield, a slow-moving, grinding wall of death. The phalanx formed the core of a larger, more complex army. It was supported by lighter, more mobile skirmishers. These troops were armed with a variety of deadly weapons, including bronze battle axes designed to crush helmets, and the distinctive sickled sword, a curved blade that could hook around an opponent's shield. These skirmishers would protect the vulnerable flanks of the phalanx or exploit gaps in the enemy line. Then there were the Sumerian battle wagons, the most prestigious element of the army. Unlike the fast, spoked-wheel chariots of later eras, these were heavy, four-wheeled carts with solid wooden wheels, pulled by teams of 4 onagers or wild asses. Archaeological evidence suggests Sumerian ingenuity was used to mitigate their clumsiness. Some models used bent wood frames, making them lighter and stronger than simple plank construction. The floor of the wagon was likely a platform of woven leather thongs, providing a degree of shock absorption for the crew. These details elevated the battle wagon from a crude cart to a piece of high technology for its era. They probably served as mobile missile platforms and command posts. A driver would struggle to control the animals, while a nobleman, the warrior of the team, would stand beside him, armed with a clutch of javelins. It was this combined, sophisticated force that Eannatum now led towards his final confrontation. The two armies finally met on the contested soil of the Guedina. On one side, the vengeful, disciplined forces of Lagash. On the other, the army of Umma, led by their king, Ush. The air would have been thick with tension. The shouts of commanders, the braying of onagers, the glint of the sun off thousands of bronze helmets. Both sides knew this transcended a simple border skirmish. This was a battle for divine favor, for history, for survival. Eonatum, as depicted on his stele, took his place at the head of his army, likely mounting his personal battle wagon. He gave the order to advance. The main body of his force, the heavy infantry, began to move forward as one. It would have been a terrifying sight, a solid wall of shields, hundreds of men, wide and several ranks deep, bristling with the points of thousands of spears, marching slowly and deliberately across the plain. The initial clash would have been horrific. The front rank of Uma's army slammed into the wall of shields and spears. The sound would have been deafening, a cacophony of splintering wood, screeching bronze, and the screams of the dying. The disciplined soldiers of Lagash, protected by their shields, held the line, methodically jabbing and thrusting with their spears. The battle quickly became a brutal, pushing match of immense pressure and brutality. The front ranks engaged with their spears, while the ranks behind them literally pushed forward with their bodies and shields, adding their collective weight to the press. The goal was to physically break the enemy's formation through immense, coordinated pressure. This was a terrifying, grinding contest of collective strength and endurance. The soldiers of Uma, perhaps less organized or less heavily armored, began to falter under the immense coordinated pressure. The line buckled, gaps began to appear, the stench of sweat, blood, and fear filled the air. It was at this critical moment that Eonatum himself entered the fray. The stele shows him descending from his chariot and taking his place in the front rank of a second phalanx formation, leading a fresh wave of troops on foot. This was an act of incredible bravery, a king sharing the greatest danger with his men. It was here, in the heart of the battle, that he was wounded, an arrow striking him in the eye. Despite the wound, he held his ground. He tore the arrow out and continued to fight, his personal courage a rallying cry for his entire army. This heroic act seems to have been the turning point. Inspired by their wounded king, the forces of Lagash surged forward with renewed fury. The army of Uma, their morale already wavering, finally broke. The retreat began as a trickle, then became a flood. Soldiers threw down their weapons and fled for their lives, a panicked mob abandoning all discipline. The battle now turned into a slaughter. The swifter troops of Lagash, the skirmishers, and those on the battle wagons pursued the fleeing enemy, cutting them down from behind without mercy. The inscription on the stele is merciless in its description of the carnage. Eonatum claims his men killed 3,600 of Uma's soldiers, a staggering number for the era. He then describes a chilling act of post-battle terror. He states that he personally added 20 massive burial mounds to the plain, a grim and highly visible monument to the scale of the slaughter, designed to be a permanent warning to any in Uma who might think of rebellion in the future. The most visceral and haunting image comes after the burials. The stele is named for the panels that show the final aftermath. The bodies of the slain soldiers of Uma are left exposed on the battlefield. Vultures, with their distinctive hooked beaks, are shown swooping down from the sky, picking at the corpses, carrying away heads and limbs in their talons. This depiction of reality also served as a theological statement that the men of Uma were so disgraced that their bodies were unworthy of a proper burial, left as carrion for wild beasts. With the army of Uma shattered, Eannatum imposed a brutal peace. He captured Enna-Kala, the successor to Ush, and forced him to swear a new, terrible oath of submission. He re-established the old border, marked out by Mesalim centuries earlier, and dug a new ditch to mark it. He erected a new collection of steles, including the one that would survive to tell us this story, recounting his victory and Ummah's crimes. He then imposed a crippling war indemnity and a massive grain tax on Ummah. The treaty stipulated that the men of Ummah could cultivate the land, but only as tenants, paying a huge portion of their harvest to the temple of Ningirsu in Lagash. He effectively turned the rival city into a vassal state, its power broken, its pride humbled, and its economy shackled to his own. On the human level, the victory was complete. Eannatum had avenged his father and restored the honor of his city. For Eannatum and the people of Lagash, the human victory was the secondary story. The true victor was Ningirsu. This is the ultimate message of the Stele of the Vultures. The back of the monument, the most important side, gives the credit entirely to the god. It fulfills the prophecy from Eannatum's dream. Ningirsu himself is shown holding the defeated soldiers of Ummah in his great battle net, a fisherman who has harvested the souls of his city's enemies. This image perfectly encapsulates the Sumerian worldview of war. In this worldview, Eannatum and his phalanx were merely the weapon. The god was the hand that wielded it. The centuries-long feud, the broken oaths, the bloody battle, and the final, brutal peace. All of it was simply the earthly reflection of a quarrel between gods. A quarrel that, for now, had been settled. Lagash stood at the zenith of its power, the undisputed master of southern Sumer, its victory sanctified and recorded in stone. Eannatum's victory was total, but the peace he imposed was brittle. The deep-seated grudge of Ummah did not die. It festered. The conflict continued intermittently for generations under Eannatum's successors, his brother Enannatum I, and later his nephew, Entemena. New rebellious rulers of Ummah, like Ur-Lumma and Il, would rise to power, refuse to pay the crippling grain tax, and challenge Lagash's authority, leading to further skirmishes and bloodshed. The history of these recurring disputes is recorded in remarkable detail on a clay document known as Entemena's Cone. Writing from the perspective of Lagash, Entemena recounts the entire century-long history of Ummah's transgressions, from the first broken oath to the latest rebellion. It is a testament to how deeply this feud was etched into the identity of his city. This state of perpetual, low-grade warfare had a profound and corrosive effect on Lagashite society. A state constantly geared for military campaigns creates a powerful class of administrators and officials needed to manage the tribute and run the war machine. Over time, this elite class began to turn its predatory instincts inward. Decades of militarization abroad slowly gave way to corruption and exploitation at home. The common people of Lagash began to suffer. Temple lands were treated as private estates by powerful families. Officials used their authority to seize property. A spiral of debt, likely driven by the need to fund the constant military readiness, began to enslave the very citizens the army was meant to protect. By the middle of the 24th century BCE, nearly 100 years after Eannatum's great victory, Lagash was a city that was strong on the outside, but rotting from within. Amidst this crisis of corruption, a new ruler seized power in Lagash. His name was Urukagina. He was a usurper, coming from outside the main royal dynasty of Eannatum. While his predecessors focused on war, Urukagina turned his gaze inward. The texts claim he was chosen by the god Ningirsu himself, who commanded him to put a stop to the wickedness and restore the ordinances of former times. Urukagina embraced this mandate, launching what is arguably the world's first recorded social and legal reform movement. The cuneiform tablets detailing his reforms are breathtaking in their scope and specificity. He began by cleaning house, firing the corrupt palace inspectors and the greedy temple overseers from their posts. He then issued a series of powerful decrees aimed directly at protecting the poor from the elite. He declared that when a son of a poor man sets up a fish pond, no one will steal his fish. He announced that if a powerful man wanted to buy the donkey of a lesser man, he had to pay a fair price in silver, and he had to ask, "If you want to sell, sell." He put a stop to the extortionate temple fees, creating a fixed and much lower price list for essential rituals. He decreed that if a man divorced his wife, he had to pay her a settlement of silver. He cracked down on abuses of power across the board, from the foreman of the boatmen to the overseer of the cattle herds. His reforms read like a systematic attempt to dismantle an entrenched system of corruption piece by piece. Most dramatically, he enacted a sweeping debt release program. The texts claim he cleared the city of usury, theft, and murder. He set the citizens of Lagash free from debt slavery, cancelling the obligations that had bound them and returning them to their families. The Sumerian term for this was amargi, which literally means return to the mother. It signified a release from debt slavery, a restoration of citizens to their families. In this poignant phrase, we find the first written expression in human history of the concept of liberty. The core of his philosophy was summed up in one powerful declaration. He announced that he had made a pact with the god Ningirsu that he would not deliver the orphan and the widow to the powerful man. This was a revolutionary idea. The concept that a king's primary duty was to establish a just society. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed that Urukagina had healed his city's soul. A just world, however, remains a dangerous one, especially when your enemies see your focus on internal peace as a sign of external weakness. While Urukagina was busy with his internal reforms, his great rival in the city of Umma was busy sharpening his sword. The ruler of Umma, a man named Lugal-Zaggisi, cared nothing for justice or piety. He cared only for power and for settling the century-old grudge his city held against Lagash. Seeing Lagash focused inward, he saw his moment. He launched a devastating surprise attack. Lugal-Zaggisi's army stormed across the Gwyddena and fell upon Lagash with shocking brutality. Their goal went beyond conquest. They sought the city's total annihilation. They looted the city's holy places. They carried off precious metals and stones from the temples, and then they put the sacred precincts to the torch. For a Sumerian, this was the ultimate act of desecration. To burn the very house of a god was a sin of the highest order. This act of rage served a dual purpose. It was also a calculated strategic move. By destroying the temples, Lugal-Zaggisi was striking at the very heart of Lagash's identity and economy. He was demoralizing the population, crippling their administration, and, most importantly, demonstrating in the clearest possible terms that his god, Shara, was more powerful than their god, Ningirsu. It was a theological, military, and economic knockout blow all in one. We have a remarkable document from the aftermath of this attack, a clay tablet on which the scribes of the defeated Uruk-agina recorded their grief and outrage. It is a raw cry of despair. The men of Umma have set fire to the temple of Enlil, it reads. They have carried away the silver and the precious stones. They have shed blood in the temple of the goddess Bao. The lament ends with a chilling curse directed at the conqueror. The men of Umma, by the despoiling of Lagash, have committed a sin against the god Ningirsu. As for Lugal-Zaggisi, the Ensi of Umma, may his goddess Nisaba make him carry this sin on his neck. It was a desperate plea for divine justice, a belief that such a terrible crime could not go unpunished. The pious reformer Uruk-agina disappears from history, his dream of a just society buried under the ashes of his city. But his curse would prove prophetic. The stage was now set for the final act of the Sumerian city-state era. With his ancient rival Lagash in ruins, a power vacuum opened in southern Mesopotamia, and Lugal-Zaggisi filled it with lightning speed. His ambitions went far beyond simply avenging his city's old resentments. He saw the endless warfare between the Sumerian cities as a crippling weakness, and he was determined to end it through total domination. His goal was to forge the squabbling city-states into a single, unified kingdom under his personal command. He turned his army south and west, marching on the great city of Uruk, the ancient home of Gilgamesh. The city fell. Instead of destroying it, he made it his new capital, adopting the title King of Uruk. This was a shrewd political move, linking his own name to the prestige of one of Sumer's most ancient and honored cities. From his new seat of power in Uruk, he continued his stunning campaign. He marched on the city of Ur, the great center of the moon god Nanna. He conquered Larsa. He subjugated his old allies and rivals alike. The cuneiform record is sparse, but the trajectory is clear. One by one, the proud, independent city-states that had defined Sumerian civilization for 1,000 years were brought to heel. His was a new kind of conquest. His goals went beyond simply collecting tribute and leaving. He was creating a single, unified political entity. He combined the priesthoods of the various cities under his own authority and may have standardized administrative practices across his new realm. He was, in effect, forging the first territorial kingdom in Sumerian history. His success was breathtaking. Within a few short years, he had accomplished what no Sumerian king before him had ever managed. He had brought an end to the endless infighting of the city-states. He had united the entire land, from the northern borders to the shores of the Persian Gulf in the south. For a brief, shining moment, Lugal-Zaggisi stood as the undisputed master of the known world. To commemorate his unprecedented achievement, Lugal-Zaggisi adopted a new, grandiose royal title. He declared himself the king who had conquered from the Lower Sea to the Upper Sea, from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. This was a statement of breathtaking ambition, claiming dominion over the entire civilized world as the Sumerians knew it. It is unlikely that his armies actually reached the shores of the Mediterranean. This title was a statement of economic and ideological control. It meant that he now controlled the great trade routes that ran up the Euphrates River, the vital arteries that brought timber, precious metals, and stone from the mountains of Anatolia and Lebanon down into the resource-poor plains of Mesopotamia. By claiming this title, He was declaring that all the paths of trade now flowed to him, that the wealth of the world was now his to command. He even claims that the great god Enlil himself had given him this dominion, stating that Enlil had straightened the paths for him, and that all foreign lands now slept in pastures under his peaceful rule. It was the pinnacle of power, the absolute zenith of a Sumerian king's ambition. He was the sole ruler, the master of trade, the chosen of the gods. His kingdom seemed secure, his legacy assured. But in his grandiloquent titles and his claims of a divinely ordained peace, there was a fatal seed of hubris. And as he looked north, towards the upper reaches of the river, he was blind to a storm that was gathering there, a storm that was about to break and wash his entire world away. The storm came from the north, from the region known as Akkad, and it had a name, Sargon. Everything about him was different. He was a Semite, a speaker of the Akkadian language, and therefore an outsider in the Sumerian world. He had no royal bloodline, no legitimate claim to any throne. His very name, Sharukin, means the true king, or the legitimate king, a name so defensive it was almost certainly propaganda, chosen by a man who knew he was neither. Later legends would shroud his origins in myth. The most famous of these, the legend of Sargon, was recorded on tablets discovered in the 7th century BCE library at Nineveh, nearly 2,000 years after his death. This text claims he was a secret baby, placed in a reed basket and set adrift on the river, much like the later story of Moses. This is a classic hero's birth literary trope, a story likely designed to obscure his real, and probably quite humble, origins. What we know from more contemporary sources is that he began his career as a cupbearer, a high-ranking but subservient official, to the king of the northern city of Kish, a man named Ur-Zababa. The cupbearer was an intimate court position, one of great trust. It required being close to the king at all times, a position of both service and observation. From this vantage point, Sargon learned the ways of the court, and he saw its weaknesses. He was an outsider, looking in at a world he was not born to, but a world he clearly believed he could master. The details are lost to history, but at some point, the servant overthrew the master. Sargon seized power in Kish. While Lugalzagesi was busy consolidating his southern kingdom and basking in his glory, this unknown, non-Sumerian upstart was building an army in the north. This new army was radically different. Its loyalty was to him and him alone, transcending any city or god. Sargon paid his soldiers with spoils from conquest, ensuring they were personally invested in his continued success. He was forging a new kind of military instrument, one designed for personal power. The clash between Sargon and Lugalzagesi seems inevitable in hindsight, but some Sumerian traditions suggest a far more complex and dramatic relationship. The straightforward story of antagonism obscures a tale of political intrigue and personal betrayal. One version of the story suggests that Sargon's old master, Ur-Zababa of Kish, actually feared his ambitious cupbearer. In this tradition, Ur-Zababa sent Sargon to the court of the powerful Lugalzagesi, who had already conquered much of Sumer. Sargon carried a hidden message on a clay tablet, asking the Lord of Uruk to kill the messenger. For reasons unknown, Lugalzagesi refused. Instead of becoming an assassin, he saw a fellow man of ambition and a potential asset. Lugalzagesi defied Ur-Zababa and entered into an alliance with Sargon. Together, the two most powerful warlords of their generation joined forces. They marched on Kish, deposed their common enemy, and conquered the city. For a brief moment, they were partners, the undisputed masters of all Mesopotamia. But this alliance of titans was destined to fail. Soon after their shared victory, the allies became rivals. With their only shared enemy gone, only one prize remained: the world itself. Sargon, the ruthless pragmatist, turned on his former partner. This addition transforms Sargon's conquest. It becomes the act of a cunning strategist turning on his former ally, making his victory more calculated, and Lugal-Zaghesi's fall all the more tragic. The final confrontation between the two former allies would be a clash of two different military philosophies. Lugal-Zaghesi's force was a coalition army. It was made up of the individual levies of the Sumerian cities he had conquered: Ur, Uruk, Larsa, each with their own generals, loyal primarily to their own city and their own patron god. It was a powerful but potentially fragile alliance, held together by the force of his personality. In contrast to the traditional city-state militias, Sargon's army was a professional standing force. His commanders were a unified tool of his will, their loyalty given to him personally. His army was likely faster, more cohesive, and more ruthless. It was an instrument of personal power, a departure from the tradition of civic duty. This gave Sargon a decisive advantage. While Lugal-Zaghesi's generals might have conflicting loyalties or squabble over strategy, Sargon's commanders followed a single vision. They were veterans of his northern campaigns, battle-hardened and loyal. Furthermore, Sargon may have pioneered new military technologies, including the powerful composite bow. This weapon, made of laminated wood, horn, and sinew, could shoot arrows with far greater force and range than the simple wooden bows used by the Sumerians. This meant Sargon's army could potentially disrupt and weaken the Sumerian phalanx from a distance, before the main clash even began. The stage was set for a battle between the old world and the new. The final confrontation came. Sargon marched his new army south, and Lugal-Zaghesi, the great unifier of Sumer, met his former ally with his coalition of 50 city-state governors. The battle, or perhaps a series of battles, was a disaster for the Sumerians. Sargon's unified command structure and superior tactics proved decisive. He smashed the Sumerian forces, capturing Lugal-Zaghesi on the battlefield. The victory was swift and total. The man who had been the master of the world just months before was now a prisoner. The great Sumerian kingdom, which had seemed like the culmination of history, had been shattered in a single campaign by an outsider from a provincial town in the north. Sargon's military genius was matched by his political cunning. He knew that simply killing the defeated king was insufficient. He needed to make a statement, a theological statement that would resonate across all of Mesopotamia. He took the captured Lugal-Zaghesi, the great king of Uruk, and locked his head into a wooden neckstock, a humiliating yoke used for common criminals or beasts of burden. He then marched his captive south, all the way to the sacred city of Nippur, the home of the great god Enlil, the divine kingmaker. And there, before the main gate of the Ekur temple, Sargon put the great Lugal-Zaghesi on display. He presented the former lord of Sumer to the gods and the world as a broken, humbled man, a testament to his own overwhelming power. This was a masterful act of political theatre. By bringing his defeated rival to Enlil's doorstep, Sargon was demonstrating that he, an Akkadian outsider, now enjoyed the favor of the king of the gods. He was claiming the Enlilship for himself through the raw right of conquest, bypassing the traditional path of piety. He was showing the world that the gods had abandoned the old Sumerian order and had chosen a new champion. And so the curse of Lagash was fulfilled in the most tragic and ironic way imaginable. The scribes who had cried out for justice, pleading that Lugalzagesi's goddess make him carry this sin on his neck, had their prayers answered. Their enemy was brought low, yoked like an animal, but their savior was a foreign conqueror who would extinguish the very world of independent city-states they had fought to preserve. The image is one of the most powerful and tragic in ancient history. The man who had finally united Sumer, the culmination of the city-state era, was brought low by the man who would invent a new kind of world, the world of empire. The age of the Sumerian kings was over. The age of Akkad had begun. As always, thank you for your time and attention.